Good morning, everyone. It is good to be together in this strange way of being together. Over the last few months, I have been reading more than I have in years. Some of this is to escape. Stories of good things happening to good people are really what I need right now. And I'm also reading a lot about people who have lived through hard times, pandemics and wars and times of uncertainty and struggle. And I am finding a kinship there. There's something that makes me feel less alone to hear the stories of people, real or imagined, who have lived with integrity in hard times. And so that is the thought behind our service today. We'll be sharing some stories from the early years of the AIDS pandemic, from the early 1980s until about the mid 1990s when life-sustaining treatments were brought to market. And so I hope they bring comfort to you in a sense that people have gone through this and lived with integrity in hard times, with compassion and with love. So come, let us gather. Come, let us connect as it is safe for us to connect. Hear the stories. And remember that we are not alone because we have each other, and we are not alone because we have exemplars who have gone before. Come, let us worship together.
Welcome all. We know you come here for different reasons, to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and your soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ways to provide outreach to others in our congregation, in our local community, and in our world community. My name is Becky Moffett Moore. I'm from the Sunday Services Committee. And I would like to extend a welcome to everyone gathered here this morning. Though we are spread afar, whether you're new or a regular at People's Church. To those of you who are visitors to our service or here for the first time, thank you for being with us today. People's Church is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association and part of a tradition of liberal religion. Here, our mission is to be a beloved community, embracing and serving our diverse world. Whoever you are, I welcome you. We welcome you.
Good morning. It's time for us to sing together. I invite you to find a good posture that enables good breathing, or you can just listen along. This is meditation on breathing.
Good morning. Um, if you're lighting a chalice at home, I encourage you to type in the chat um, where you're lighting your chalice. Our chalice lighting today is "Love is Our Greatest Purpose" by J.E. Alberheimer Jr. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we convent with each other, with each other and with all that is sacred in life.
I have an announcement to share with all of you, and that is after 13 years of faithful service as our database administrator or database manager, Dana Kubinski has found a new job. She'll be working at a water testing lab, testing water quality in our area. And we are so excited that she has found a job that she's excited about, and we will miss her. So the week to come is her final week with us. And I invite you to express your gratitude and congratulations. I'll be passing along the chat messages to her. And she has especially requested cards. So if you can drop something in the mail, I'm sure she would love to hear from you. She has served us well. And now our story for all. So in my family, we talk about love and how love is something that you feel, but love also has to be something that you show, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to have it only be in your heart. You need people to know that it's there. And so I have been thinking about what that means in these days, and we have been thinking about it. And so there are ways we show love, ways like wearing our masks and having our hand sanitizer, of course. And there are other ways that my family has found to show some love, and I wanted to share them with you so you can share them, so they might inspire some ways of showing love in your own family, your own community. So the first story I want to share is about these massive bags of chocolate. This is white chocolate. As some of you know, my husband is a brewer at a restaurant, and sometimes restaurants end up with things that they don't need. And a couple months ago, the restaurant that my husband works at ended up with 40 extra pounds of chocolate. And so Brian brought it home, but our family, I don't think, could use 40 pounds of chocolate even if we worked really hard. So he put out a note to some of our neighbors and said, "We have all of this chocolate, would you like some?" And of course, people said yes. And so we spent some time dividing it into bags and containers, and then walking most of the 40 pounds of chocolate around our neighborhood, dropping it off at people's houses. So that is one way to show love. Another practice that we have in our family that we developed during this pandemic stay-at-home time, when we don't get to see the people that we love very much, is something called Kindness Day. So every couple months we pick a day and we say, this is Kindness Day. And we make a list of people on a yellow legal pad that we love. And it's never everyone that we love, because that would take too long, but it's usually around 20 people. And then we work our way through the list thinking of a kind thing to do for every person on that list. So sometimes we send them a card or a video message or a present. Sometimes the kind things we do to people, they don't actually even really notice, like we will pick up some garbage on the street near their home or rake a few leaves off their sidewalk. And spending a day focused on kindness, at least for me, makes me feel a little bit better and a little bit more connected to all of the people that I care about, even if I can't give them a big hug because we all need to keep our distance. So I invite you in this time of distance and this time when the case counts for coronavirus are surging in our community, to find the ways to be kind now that might be new ways to let the people that you love know that you love them and show the love. And this is now, I'm transitioning to introducing our offering, and I get to talk about a new way that folks at the church are showing kindness. And I love all of the kind messages that are appearing for Dana. I will be sure that she sees all of them. Thank you. So a few weeks ago, I was in a meeting and I just named how overwhelmed I was feeling between work and remote school and not having babysitters or so many of the things, indoor places to go that my family relies on, had come to rely on. And another person in that meeting contacted me later and said, I can make you dinner. And so she did. She brought my family dinner, and it was such a gift to not have to plan one more meal. It doesn't seem like much, but just the mental energy of thinking through what my family is likely to eat, what we need from the grocery store, what we have in our cabinet, and all of that is exhausting. And so it was such a gift. And we were thinking about it, and we thought this could be something we could do more broadly in our church. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one exchange. And so starting this week, we are launching this program in the November newsletter, where if you are someone who would like a meal brought to you once a month by People's People, you can sign up on the sign-up sheet for that. And if you're someone with the capacity to bring a meal to someone once a month for the next few months, you can sign up on that sign-up sheet. I'm probably going to sign up on both. And if that's your story, you are invited to pick both sides. We know that for some people, this is a time of the fullest days they've ever had. And for other folks have time and talent. And so many of the things that they had been devoting it to have been canceled. So this is a way in our congregation to be generous with each other and show love and care and connection when so many of our regular ways of doing that are off limits and not safe. I wish we could just have a really big potluck in this room. But barring that, we will have small meals showing up at different doorsteps. And that is good too. So I invite you when this appears in your inbox or in your mailbox in the next few days to sign up on the list or the lists that you are capable of being part of. And I invite you to continue to be the generous people that you are. So this is the time when we ask for the offering and please continue to support the good and important work of our church. Thank you.
Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through stress and strife. Help me live with dignity. Let me know serenity. Fill me with a vision, clear my
Please join me in giving thanks to all that sustains us. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love which none of us can accomplish alone.
Our song for meditation today is "O Liberating Rose." It's one of the songs in our gray hymnal that I love, but never hear because it is hard to sing. And I wanted to tell you the story of the song because that is important too. So the lyrics were written by Mark Bellatini, who's a Unitarian Universalist minister. And he wrote it for the dedication of the Mark DeWolf House, which was a home for people living and dying with AIDS, supported by Seattle's University Unitarian Church. Mark DeWolf was a Unitarian Universalist minister and the first openly gay minister in Canada. He died of AIDS complications in 1988. He was 35. And the words of the hymn are based on conversations Bellatini had with DeWolf about theology and the need for new ways of talking about the divine, the search for a new language.
O liberating rose that glows on ragged stem, your beauty helps all hearts lose power to condemn. Your buds are dyed with prophecy, your thorns are tougher poetry. You sign the whole and gift of life. O liberating fire that calls for cleansing rage, whenever hurtful lies distort a present age, your dancing dreams our liberty to challenge each indignity. You sign the whole and faith of life. O liberating song, whose echo now we sing, your lyrics swelling line rekindle strengthening. Your harmonies portray the time when seeds we sow shall bloom sublime. You sign the whole and hope of life. O liberating love, we hear you in a sigh. We glimpse you when we see. Oh, what a weary eye. We touch you when our hands extend to soothe or to embrace a friend. You sign the whole and source of life.
Several months ago, I put a little note in our church newsletter saying I was working on a couple of different service ideas for the fall, and if people had experiences or stories that they would want to share. And Tim Kieffer was one of the people who said, yes, I have something to say about the AIDS crisis. And he wrote drafted a reflections that we were working on together with him, or is helping him with over the past few months. And now I get to present the final product to all of you. So I give you People's Church member, Tim Kieffer.
My name is Tim Kieffer, and I'd like to share some personal remembrances of the early days of the AIDS pandemic. In the early 1980s, there were few medical facts available to confront the fear of this disease, other than that it was unclear how the disease was transmitted, and that there were no treatments, and there were no cures. The horrible images of people dying with this disease added to the fear, struggling on a ventilator, the telltale lesions of Kaposi's sarcoma, young bodies wasting away to skin and bones. My friend Dwayne and I sang first tenor together in the Windy City Gay Chorus in the early 80s. A few weeks before I moved to Kalamazoo in the summer of 1984, we traveled to Europe. During that trip, we toured the remains of the concentration camp at Dachau, Germany. At the end of the tour, we sat on what had been the concrete foundation of one of the barracks, trying to understand the unfathomable. We talked about how so many gay men, our ancestors in spirit, had died here, warriors against hate and persecution. The inverted pink triangle had been sewn onto their clothing to identify them as homosexuals, and it remains the symbol for the gay rights movement today. Dwayne sobbed. At the time, I believed that his tears were in reaction to the horrors of that place and the realization that injustices persist against the gay community. But years later, I realized that he was also crying because he knew that he too would be dying before his time. How could I have missed that? Less than 3 years later, Dwayne died of AIDS at age 35, just weeks after telling me and his closest friends that he had the disease. He never did tell his family. I remain so deeply saddened that he endured those years without sharing his secret with anyone until the very end. A few months before Dwayne died, my partner Jean had shingles. His physician recommended that we both be tested for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. The nearest test site was in Lansing, where we were given numbers instead of using our real names. After being tested and returning home, we waited an agonizing 2 weeks, then were called back to the test site to learn the results. Sitting in an unfamiliar office, a stranger told us that we both tested positive for HIV. Still no treatments, still no cure. Although we had prepared ourselves for the worst, we were stunned. We felt we were given a death sentence. It was a long ride back to Kalamazoo. What do we do now? I was 30, Jean 34. I had just graduated from Western and was only a couple weeks into my first occupational therapy job. Jean had earned a promotion and tenure at Western the previous semester. Above all else, we realized that we needed to remain employed so that we would not lose our group health insurance. And just like Dwayne, we didn't feel that we could talk to others about it. At the time, people believed that having AIDS meant that you were gay, and that if you were gay, you probably had AIDS and could infect everyone around you. You could lose your job, your health insurance, the support of your family, the support of your church. We were once again submitting to the closet of secrecy and shame that we had broken through years before when we embraced our sexuality. In December 1991, I took Jean to the Kalamazoo airport for a flight to Dallas, where he would spend Christmas with his parents. Before boarding his flight, Jean told me that given the progression of his virus, our doctor thought he would likely die within 3 years. He had so dreaded telling me that. Death moved from likely to certain. It was time to overcome our fear of being open about this disease, to no longer suffer in silence. It was time to be honest with family, friends, and coworkers. We needed to educate others so that we were supported in our last years, so that we could live and die with dignity. Not only did our friends and family rise to the challenge, but we felt encouraged and supported by an increase in public awareness that the toll of this disease was taking. Rock Hudson's diagnosis put AIDS on the front page. The red ribbon became a gesture of support when celebrities wore them on their clothing at public functions. Civil disturbances by organizations such as ACT UP were making the evening news. Less conspicuous were grassroots community organizations, including our local CARES organization, which was established the same year that Hudson died. Jean died in 1994. It had been 10 years after HIV was verified to be the cause of AIDS, and still there was no vaccine, no cure. There were only 3 drugs approved for treatment, drugs so ineffective that they are no longer produced. I watched his tall, strong dancer's body wither away, but he died with dignity, in our home, surrounded by friends and family. It was a culmination of a life well lived, wanting to live and love honestly, no more secrets, and without shame.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast.
Thank you, Tim, for sharing your story with all of us. Thank you also, Savannah, for that last song. Waterfalls by TLC was a hit pop song in 1994. It was the first pop song, or first so widely successful pop song to focus on HIV and AIDS. Once there was a virus that infected animals, and then in a faraway place, it mutated and started to infect humans. The virus spread, many people got sick, many people died. There was no cure. People were scared, and people were also brave and loving. This is a story of our current COVID-19 pandemic, and it is also the story of the AIDS pandemic, at least until the mid-1990s, when effective treatment was developed. There are, of course, major differences between HIV and the COVID-19 coronavirus. They are transmitted in different ways. This means the ways we comfort the ill and the dying are different. The ways we forge connection in the midst of these pandemics are different. The communities that are most impacted are different as well. With HIV in our country, it was gay men who were most infected at first, though not exclusively. So the fear of the disease combined with homophobia in toxic ways. And despite all of these differences, and in recent months, there are stories from the AIDS crisis years that feel especially important to tell now. As we live through our own pandemic, I have found comfort in stories of other pandemics, especially in stories of people living with integrity, love, and bravery in times of illness and uncertainty. Stories like the one Tim just shared with us. An AIDS activist named Vito Russell had a very famous speech called "Why We Fight," and it included these lines. When future generations ask what we did in the war, we have to be able to tell them that we were out here fighting, and we have to leave a legacy to the generations of people who will come after us. Remember that someday the AIDS crisis will be over. And when that day has come and gone, there will be a people alive on this earth who will hear the story that once there was a terrible disease and a brave group of people stood up and fought, and in some cases died, so that others might live and be free. I have 3 stories that I want to share with you today. Stories of compassion, solidarity, and creating new families when the ones people were born into didn't offer the love and care and support that was needed to endure. Story number 1. The San Diego Democrats for Equality is one of the oldest LGBT organizations in the country. And in 1983, most of the male members of the club had HIV. Many had AIDS and were near death. These gay and bisexual men needed donated blood to prolong their lives, but there was a blood shortage, and they were not considered a priority by local medical providers. What they needed were direct donations, someone to give blood specifically for them, but they did not know where to find that. None of their gay male friends, even the ones without HIV, were allowed to donate blood. This restriction against donations by gay men remains in place still. Most of these men had been rejected by their biological families, so that also could not be a source of blood. So a new family was formed. Wendy Sue Bigelason, Nicolette Ibarra, and Barbara Vick, female members of the Democrats for Equality, organized a special blood drive in hopes of getting these men the blood they needed. These leaders reached out to other women in their lesbian communities for help, hoping that maybe a few dozen would come and donate blood. Over 200 women showed up for the first blood drive. One of the participants said women came out of the woodwork, women that didn't want to have anything to do with men. It was an incredible experience to see the caring and the support. Many became consistent blood donors for years. They called themselves the Blood Sisters of San Diego, and collectively, their blood donations added years to the lives of people with AIDS and HIV in San Diego. Story number 2. In 1984, a young woman named Ruth Corker Burks went to visit a friend in a hospital near her home in Hot Springs, Arkansas. On the way to her friend's room, she noticed another room, a room with a door covered with a plastic tarp. The nearby nurses were talking about how much they didn't want to care for the patient in that room. Ruth had read the headline. She suspected the patient inside had AIDS, and she pushed away the tarp and went in to visit him. She met a man near death, a man who was calling out for his mother, wanting to see her one more time before he died. Ruth wanted to give him that dying wish. She talked to the nursing staff, who told her that the man's mother didn't want to see him, but Ruth was persistent and got the mother's number and called her later that day. The mother didn't want to see her dying son. She rejected him because of his sexuality. So the next day, Ruth returned to the hospital, prepared for a hard conversation with that man to tell him that his mother would not come. And when she entered the room, The man said, "Oh, Mama, I knew you'd come." He was deep in the dementia that sometimes comes before dying of AIDS. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," she responded. And she sat with him, holding his hand for the next 13 hours, the last 13 hours of his life. And Ruth's care for that man did not end there. No one would claim his body. No funeral director would care for him. No cemetery would allow him to be buried there. So Ruth had him cremated, put his remains in a cookie jar, and buried him herself in her family cemetery. And that visit and care for one young man set Ruth's life on a new trajectory. Over the next decade, she became a one-woman AIDS hospice in her community, sitting by bedsides, helping with doctor visits and manage medicines, writing obituaries, granting dying wishes as she was able, including helping one young man go for an elephant ride at the zoo, and loving people until their dying breath and beyond. She buried over 40 queer men who died from AIDS in her family cemetery, claiming them as her family when they were rejected by others. After the developments of the medicines that made HIV less deadly, Ruth turned her focus to advocacy and education. She served as the White House consultant on AIDS education for her childhood friend, President Bill Clinton. Story number 3. In 1987, in New York City, a group of people, many of them living with HIV and AIDS, but not all of them, formed an organization called the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP. ACT UP brought public attention to the AIDS crisis in new ways and brought new medicines to market. These activists did this through a combination of carefully staged protests and amateur scientific work. I'm only going to share highlights, but I encourage you to read about this powerful organization or watch the documentary How to Survive a Plague to see these activists in action and hear the story in their own words. First, the protests. ACT UP, led by Larry Kramer, was skilled at the art of protest, drawing attention and making clear demands, and bringing a sense of theatricality to all of it. Within weeks of the group's formation, they held a protest on Wall Street to draw attention to the high cost of HIV medicines. At that time, medicines used to treat HIV were some of the most expensive drugs and were inaccessible to many of the people who needed them most. They held a kiss-in at a local hospital, filling up the lobby and then kissing each other to protest that to demand that hospital staff stop attacking patients with HIV and AIDS. Because then homophobic hospital staff were attacking the patients they were supposed to serve, and there was no consequences from the hospital administration. People with HIV and AIDS and people who are gay, bisexual, or queer were not legally protected in any way then. ACT UP had frequent protests at the National Institute of Health to demand that the government devote more resources to finding treatments for HIV and AIDS. They placed an enormous condom over the house of Senator Jesse Helms with the words, "The condom to stop unsafe politics. Helms is deadlier than a virus." Helms was a leading opponent of AIDS research, believing that people with HIV deserved to die. They staged a die-in at the Catholic Cathedral during Mass to protest the cardinal's opposition to condom use. And the funerals. When someone in the group died, their funeral sometimes became a public gathering for lament, grief, and further protest. Pallbearers walked caskets through the streets, sometimes to the offices of the mayor or a presidential campaign or some other location where they needed to draw attention while people chanted. They held a funeral in Washington, D.C., and people scattered ashes on the White House lawn, chanting, "We bring the dead to your door. We won't take it anymore." Simultaneous with this public theater as protest and demands, other activists formed a group within ACT UP to figure out how to treat and cure HIV and AIDS. This was a group of mostly HIV positive men, but there were others, including a woman who was a retired chemist who came in from the suburbs and understood the bureaucracy of bringing a drug to market and helped the group understand how you do that. This group immersed themselves in the emerging science of AIDS, learning how to read scientific journals, researching treatments, developing protocols for their own experiments, and running underground drug trials on themselves with medicines illegally imported. They documented their trial protocols and worked in tandem with the protesters to make leaders at the National Institute of Health listen to them. They demanded that the NIH include HIV positive people on committees that made decisions about AIDS research, and that the meetings of these committees be open to the public. They demanded that the NIH make sure that women and people of color were included in all drug trials, because for a while people thought only certain people would get HIV and AIDS. They demanded that drugs be made accessible more quickly. They argued that since they were dying, they felt it immoral to hold back on any possible treatment options. ACT UP, both the protesters and the amateur scientists worked with dedication for years, and they saw results. Many of the demands were met by the National Institute of Health. They were invited to speak at scientific conferences and became authorities in the areas of AIDS medicines because few others were devoting the time and the energy that they were. It was the activists who created the study plans and trial protocols that were eventually used to bring protease inhibitors to the market in the mid-1990s. And protease inhibitors were the first effective treatment for HIV. Protease inhibitors are the medicines that have turned HIV from a death sentence to a chronic condition for those who have the means to access those medicines. And things changed when those drugs came to market. We can't claim that the AIDS crisis is over now, but it has shifted. There is now medicine that can keep people from contracting HIV, pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP. So I ask you, if you're engaging in behavior that puts you at risk for HIV, please talk to a medical provider about going on PrEP. And HIV is no longer an immediate death sentence for people who have access to the best medicines. But only 2/3 of HIV positive people in the world have access to them right now. And about 700,000 people died from AIDS last year. The crisis now is about access and poverty and indifference, which can be harder to cure than a disease is. I tell these stories today because they are, for me, they are a source of comfort. It is powerful to remember that once there was a terrible disease and a brave group of people stood up and fought, and in some cases died, so that others might live and be free. I hope they give you comfort. I hope they also give you inspiration. In the midst of that deadly pandemic, there were brave people who responded with care and compassion and commitment. People who used what they had: blood, hands, a family cemetery, loud voices, the ability to understand science, a willingness to experiment on themselves in hopes of furthering medical understanding, to keep people alive a little longer, to press for effective treatment, to bless the dying, to bring a little bit more love into the world. So I hope we might find ways to be brave and loving in the midst of the pandemic of this moment. And of course, we can't simply copy what worked before and use it now. I wish it was that easy. But most of the things the exemplars of that time did are not safe to do now, like holding the hands of the dying or large public gatherings for protest. And the needs aren't the same either. The fear and uncertainty of our current day is not overlaid with homophobia in the same way, though the ideas that some lives are more expendable and worthy of treatment and care than others still remains. And yet, this is our moment to step into the lineage of the brave souls who have lived with integrity, bravery, and love in the midst of uncertainty, illness, and death. Perhaps one day, people might gather in their own days of pandemic and strife and tell the stories of this time, of the people who were dedicated mask wearers and hand sanitizer users, and the people at the scientific front lines, and all of the ways we show up to show care. And tell those stories of how we lived with integrity and bravery and love. So may it be so. May we make it so. And amen.
I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I need you. You need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. I pray for you.
I pray for
You
you.
pray for
You
me.
pray for me.
I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
So a few final words from Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage. For deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. So go in peace and go in love, everyone. Blessings on all of you.